Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. Sorry about these technical issues. Hopefully it won't affect things too much. Unfortunately, it means that I'm not going to get my speaker notes here, so I'm going to be doing this from memory, which is going to be very exciting. So let's get going. I'm Noah Falstein. I'm Chief Game Designer at Google. This talk is called Transmogrified Reality. I've been doing this for a very long time. I want to welcome you all to GDC. This really feels, for those of us who've been coming for a long time, like an extended family gathering. I've been in the games industry for 35 years as of this last February, and this is my 28th GDC. So it's really nice being back here, and happy to have everybody here. I'm curious, how many of you are coming to GDC for the very first time? Okay, and how many have been here for 5 years or more? All right, and 10 years or more? I see some familiar faces. That's the thing. The farther back I go, the more people I actually know, so very reassuring that way. Well, I'm going to be talking about this new thing that I'm currently the only one calling Transmogrified Reality, but I think I'll explain that in a bit so we can get through. And I'm also going to be giving you surfing lessons, which is also going to be really interesting because I've never actually surfed in my life, so take that with a grain of salt, or an ocean of salt, as the case may be. So, the games industry has had a lot of ups and downs over the years. When I first was working on this slide, I actually was starting to fill it in with, the crash of 1984 and, all these different peaks and valleys. But the reality is I realized that the way that the game industry works, it goes up and down for everyone, but not necessarily in lockstep. If you're working in, console when somebody else is working on PC, you may be going up when they're going down and vice versa. If you're the first one to latch onto this wonderful new smartphone, everything's going great. If you're one of the last ones trying to make feature phones work, probably not so good. So it's been a lot of ups and downs, but really what's encouraging is that the overall trend has been upwards as this GDC shows. I mean, in fact, I find it intriguing looking at here, the first GDC I went to, we had under 200 people, and it's pretty clear we've got more than that just in this room now. So that was the entire GDC, and it was amazing to us to see that many game developers in one place. So we're doing well, things are moving up, really good to see. But the fact is, there are lots of little ups and downs. The really big ones only come around maybe once every decade or so. And kind of arguable exactly what have been the most seminal things, but just take three examples. When consoles started to finally take off in the US, lagging behind Japan a little bit, and of course things like the PS2 that became a high watermark and just did incredibly well. That was a big deal. But even beyond games, when the World Wide Web came into view, that came almost out of nowhere. It seems that when these things come together, you have a bunch of different components that have to be in the right place at the right time. And the third one, of course, was smartphones, which was just about 8 years ago that smartphones really started to take off and be introduced. And that, as we can see, has really revolutionized a lot of what's going on in games. Even if you're not working on smartphones, people are probably, buying your games by looking at their phones to shop for them. And certainly the whole free-to-play thing going on wouldn't have been possible without the digital distribution that we've got now with the games coming onto our phones directly. So these really big innovations are rare, and it's very lucrative to catch them if they do happen. It can actually be pretty disastrous if you miss it when it's coming and you're the last one to switch over. But this particular new one I call Transmogrified Reality. And I spent a little bit of time with Thesaurus, actually an online Thesaurus, because we've got the World Wide Web, and that was the last, or a couple big innovations ago. And transmogrify is a great word. It means to transform, especially in a surprising or magical manner. And that just felt right for what I'm talking about, because we've had virtual reality, we've had augmented reality. Each of those is slightly fuzzily defined, and both of them have been around for a very long time. That, again, I hope I'm not doing too much of the old guy bringing back the memories, but that's one of my roles here. And in 1984, I was working at LucasArts, actually Lucasfilm Games, before it became LucasArts, and one of our tools guys there had a whole bunch of friends who were doing crazy things, and one of them was a guy named Jaron Lanier, who had just invented this visual programming language, and the way that he manipulated this visual programming language was with something he called a data glove. That was a glove he put on with a lot of wires, and it let him essentially move his hand, and the gestures of his hand were like reaching into the screen. Not a big deal now. In fact, now we do it with, like leap motion, and you don't even need a glove. But at that point, it was just revolutionary. And the thing that was kind of comical about it is he was gesturing at the screen, wanting to show us this visual programming language, and we were staring at the glove because we thought that was by far the coolest thing about what was going on. And that idea of reaching into a virtual world and eventually coming into that virtual world, or as they say in the Matrix, pulling the world over your eyes, that's been something that's been very compelling to us for a long time. That reading science fiction books about it many years ago, then watching TV shows and movies, Star Trek with the holodeck, or the Matrix showing what happens when you really get to a higher level, and a lot of that was also inspired by books like Neuromancer and the whole cyberpunk thing. So the real thing about transmogrified reality is the idea to seamlessly mix reality and virtual images together. We're not quite there yet, but I think, and I hope I will show to you today, that we're really at the point where it's important to start moving in this direction and getting ready to understand how all these component pieces work, so that as they come together, you're ready for that next big step. And of course, know how to surf. So there are a lot of different approaches to this. There's the standard virtual reality and augmented reality stuff, and I say standard, but of course there is no one standard, but the idea of virtual reality as something taking over your entire view, and augmented reality as being able to pop up virtual images in, usually on a screen that you're watching in front of your eyes, but let the real world through as well. And there's also various mobile and non-mobile forms of this. Lots of different companies have been announcing recently. I'll get into some of that in a bit. But first, let's think about the components that are coming together here. With each of these previous innovations that we've had, for example, when you think about smartphones, well, actually, let me go back to game consoles. You needed processors to get powerful enough and cheap enough to be able to be something that people could afford to buy in this box in their home. You needed televisions to be good enough, and there to be even, color TVs, which in the 80s when this happened, there were still black and white TVs out there in a lot of homes. You needed to really move into this new phase where the pieces were all there so that when game consoles came together, it was ready. It was even a bigger thing when the World Wide Web came along, because you had the pieces like the internet that had been around for many years at that point, but was basically a data and text only thing. And you had graphic cards which had been pushed to a higher level, mainly because of the games industry. And you also had modems, which again, mainly because of the games industry, were starting to allow people to have a consumer level device that could allow them to communicate online. And all those pieces were finally at a maturity that then they could be combined. And within a year, I remember from some of the first web browsers, I was seeing URLs on the sides of buses, and that was a sign for me that this is something that had really come. And of course, the processors had to be fast enough. You always need more power for these sorts of things. Even more so when we went to smartphones, where they not only had to be fast, but they had to be small and light and had relatively low battery usage, as well as having small, high-resolution screens that also functions as touch screens. In each of those technologies, touch screens were very large and table-sized in their first iterations with very low resolution, so you couldn't pick out individual pixels. They got smaller, they got lighter. Processors, again, got better and better so that you could keep up with everything that was needed to do the telecommunications. And of course, we had the digital phones that were necessary before you could have a digital phone that actually had a smart screen and a full computer on it. So those were the previous ones. Now we've got the work that people have been doing in augmented reality and virtual reality. There's a lot being done with not only head-mounted displays, but the sensors involved in them, and I'll get into this a bit more. And once again, it always requires increasingly fast speed, bigger memories to be able to support the kind of resolution that we need in front of your face to make a very seamless world. So a lot of stuff coming together, and I think we're right at that point right now. So here's what people thought an arcade of the future might look like way back in 1983. Tim Skelly, who did some well-known arcade games back then, put out a little book of cartoons that he had drawn called Shoot the Robot, Then Shoot Mom. And I love that book. I know I have a copy somewhere in the garage, but I was thinking about that and I thought, boy, wasn't there this really funny picture of, you know, what has now become pretty commonplace sort of virtual reality? And I actually looked Tim up online and was able to get this picture from the book there. And as you can see, it doesn't quite look like this, but he was pretty much on target considering this was over 30 years ago, and captured also the reaction that people have to how silly it looks to have these things strapped over your heads. But it was interesting to see that as long ago as, you know, in 1983, people were thinking about how to wrap that world around your face. And as you see here, even be able to move in it. You know, I particularly like that guy, you know, with his arms out there. Frankly, having a VR that is not tethered, where you can really feel like you're flying, has been one of my longtime dreams. And I'd love to even have something where you could be tethered from the ceiling by springs, so you could get that sense of being a bird and have some sensors on your arms to see when you're flapping them. But we'll leave that to some of you to develop these things. So, where are these component technologies now? Well, I work for Google, and I don't want to make this a Google show, but I'm not at liberty to show you the details of what everybody else is doing. What I'm going to do before I dive into some of our Google stuff is mention some of the other technologies that I think are really worth looking at and that I would strongly recommend that you check out. First, obviously, is Oculus Rift, and they've gotten a lot of press and a lot of attention, and deservedly so. They have some amazing people working there, and they've come up with some great technologies that I think have convinced a lot of people that virtual reality was finally ready for prime time after so many false starts over the years. Reminds me of one more old guy story. When there was an earlier range of VR devices out there, they didn't work really well as VR devices. But they actually, there was one company I remember that managed to keep going for a year or two longer than the others, because they found that they could actually sell to dentists' office who were using this strap-on display to let the patients watch movies and still have their faces worked on, because otherwise if you had the movie and in front of you was your dentist with a drill, it wasn't a great movie. And if you were watching Marathon Man, it was a really bad thing to do. But with, you know, these goggles, even though they were just using it to show you a video, that was catching on for a while. Anyway, because of that and because of the failures like that, it took a lot of convincing for many of us. I was a skeptic as recently as a year ago that we were really ready for VR yet. But what Oculus has been doing really impressed me. And with Samsung Gear VR now, they've made a mobile version of that. Another thing to look at is Cast AR. I don't know if we have anybody from that company in the audience, but Jerry Ellsworth and others are doing a great job with that. That's worth noting because Cast AR uses an inexpensive reflective material. If you're not looking at that material, you don't get the right illusion. So it's very limited in that way. But on the other hand, if you are looking at that material, it can do stuff that none of the other systems can do quite easily. And that will be shown here, I think, at GDC. I don't know if it's public. I just know it's being shown publicly here, but I expect so since they've been showing it publicly at quite a few other shows. And it's interesting looking at the contrast between their approach and, you know, Oculus's approach, or for that matter, what we're doing at Google with Project Tango that I'll get into in a moment. And I also want to put a shout out to our Project Cardboard, which is our main VR effort right now. How many people here have heard of Project Cardboard? Okay, good. I would expect most of the people at GDC to. How many people have a cardboard? Oh, very good. It's working. So we were able to ship, I think we hit 500,000 of those in December, and we have had over 1 million downloads of the cardboard software to this date, and there are a lot of third parties making them as well because we've given away the blueprints to make that sort of thing. That's a $20 or even less if you go with some of the other online suppliers system that uses your phone, plugs it in, and gives you virtual reality. And I know for myself, when I first tried it, I was really skeptical, but it actually gives you one of these sort of aha moments of, whoa, this is, even for an inexpensive thing using my current phone technology, this is pretty good. And we know that, of course, phones are going to get better and better, and it's happening, all the time. So let's see, who else am I leaving out? Well, Magic Leap, they haven't talked a whole lot about what they're doing, but they have this operation down in Florida that's doing some amazing stuff. I'm not at liberty to talk about what I have seen of that, but I will note that there's a lot online that you can read about it, and they have consistently shown it off to people with amazing results where people are just raving about how cool it is. So I'll leave it at that without saying anything on my own part. And of course, Microsoft with their HoloLens announcement, that's getting a lot of attention as well. I haven't had a chance to see that myself, so I'm not going to be able to back that up. But I love the fact that that really gets in the spirit of what I'm describing as transmogrified reality, where they do virtual reality, but you don't just see an image sort of floating, partially obscuring something. They're showing, at least in their demos they've showed, these really solid images that are registered to the real world, which is a hard thing to do. One last, no, I'll probably leave it at that. There are other announcements that you may have already heard. I think there will be more later in the show, and I'll go on from there. But I want to talk a little bit about Project Tango just to give you a sense of what's possible and why I think it's an interesting technology to consider before we get to our surfing. I haven't forgotten that part. So I'm going to, hopefully I don't break the system here, but I'm going to try and run our video. Let's see, where is let's do that one. Let's see if I can go full screen. Oh, and I forgot to hook up the sound. Well, imagine nice music. But the interesting thing about Tango is that, here we go. Interesting thing about Tango is that it can track in 6 degrees of freedom, and well, I'll let you see the video and then I'll talk about its capabilities. These are some ideas of stuff that we've already tested out that work quite well. Take a look at how accurately the little cone there is tracking the motion of what's going on as they go through the roller coaster. This is one of the applications that I think is going to really mean a lot to the game world. Notice it's not just the rooms, but everything in it that it's able to capture, including the people. Anybody here seen The Unfinished Swan? I always think of that when I see this demo. And this was a proof of concept in one of our Google buildings to direct you to one of our conference rooms. Okay. I will thank you, and I will pass that applause back to the Tango team. Now let's see if I can get back to this. Whoops, that's the wrong one. Wait a minute. Of course, that's what I'm doing wrong. Sorry about that. Okay, there we go. So Tango, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, but look at this not as an ad for Tango, but rather a discussion of some of the components that I think are going to be really important for this transmogrified reality. And I should clarify for a moment actually what I'm thinking of there. We don't have this now. We may not have it for another 2 years, maybe another 5 years, but I'm personally convinced that this is coming very soon. The idea that you'll have a head-mounted display, that head-mounted display will be able to let the real world shine through or show you any kind of virtual world that you want. So it could be VR or augmented reality or some mix of those. I've heard people refer to this as blended reality, but I really don't think that does it justice. And I think quite importantly, it needs to be mobile. It can't be something where you're tethered to a computer, or stuck in a room that has to be, just one room and pre-prepared in some laborious way for you to do this sort of thing. Now, granted, all of those constraints, right now we're seeing things that deal with each of those constraints singly, or even several of them at once, but nobody that's been able to do everything at once and put it out into the field yet. There's a lot of really interesting stuff to show that we're really close on pretty much all those levels. Now, what Tango specializes in is the idea of having a mobile sensor that is aware of the room around it. The Tango tablet is, we've got a phone form factor version of Tango, but also a tablet that's the one that we're using for the demos and that you saw in the video there. And it has three basic ways of dealing with the world. One of them is to do motion tracking. It's got 6 degrees of freedom, so it not just rotates like a phone does, but it can tell whether it's being moved left and right, up and down. And it is also using depth perception to bounce an infrared signal off of stuff that ranges from about 0.5 meter out to 3 meters out, and can orient itself in the room, and that's how it does a lot of the room mapping as well. And as it does that mapping and learns what's going on around it, it can build a point cloud database and start to understand what its surroundings are and make either a computer map of that or a visual map that looks like the real room, or let the real room shine through to the player. It actually has both a regular color camera and a 120-degree black and white camera that it uses to pick up all the little cues. And in some of that visual you saw where there were lots of dots that were being attached to the corners of things, that was being done in real time by that black and white camera. So what this makes possible is that you can use the tablet and it becomes kind of a window into a virtual world. As you move it around, it really feels almost like you're holding a magic portal that you can see through it, and you get the right perspective as you move it around to see into this virtual world. The non-game applications for that are pretty exciting. For one thing, I would expect that the real estate world of rentals and house sales is just going to need these things almost instantly once they're out there. Because if you can go to somebody's house, scan their furniture, show them a new home with their furniture in it, even move stuff around, sliding it with your finger to see whether it would look right, or conversely, you go to the new place and somebody brings their set of the furniture they already have so they can sort of plug it in and use an augmented reality thing of seeing their furniture superimposed in this new empty space. That's just going to be an incredible sales tool, as well as a great opportunity for the furniture salespeople to say, oh, this is a wonderful TV, but you might want a larger Samsung 55-inch right here. This is what it would look like, and here it is running one of our Samsung ads. So, brave new world for us here. As I mentioned in the video, the room mapping is one of the things I find most exciting. There are a whole bunch of applications that we can do where you scan in the room that you're in and use that as your play field. either, and really you can do this in so many different ways that I can't enumerate them now. Just to give you a sense of it, though, you can actually be taking a desktop, for example, and have it register where that desktop is. And as you look through your Tango device, you can actually see an army marching to battle, or possibly you use this with a dollhouse and you can see animated characters that are moving through the dollhouse that you can interact with now, and that as you move this window to look at it, they stay registered in the right place within the dollhouse and it can interact with you. And it gets even more interesting if you go through the world. Basically you can get a low-res view very quickly, and on subsequent passes or with a little bit of offline processing, get better detailed views like the one you see here. We've got a great video online showing one of our third-party partners scanning in this room and showing you how it really captures a lot of the fidelity of what the room really looks like. But imagine that you scan in a room and you can do whole new genres of games. So stealth games have been quite popular. But what about a stealth game where it wasn't you controlling a character that had to be stealthy? You actually have to be stealthy. And you're taking your Tango tablet, and it knows exactly how quickly it's moving through the world and where it is. So you need to move it through this laser maze without intercepting any of those lasers. And if you turn at more than, 15 degrees per second, or move it more than a meter per second in speed, you'll set off an alarm. And then, of course, you add some guards and you have some other hazards in there. You've got a whole new genre of games. Another thing that I think would be possible with this sort of thing is at the experimental game session last year, they showed a wonderful game where there are two people holding a cell phone and essentially dancing and using the phone as kind of a common point that was mapping out their dance in the world. But phones don't have the kind of degrees of freedom of accuracy that Tango does, and the ability also to scan in the world. And imagine two different people with these tablets using them as kind of a dance instructor. It could be the next level of what the DDR craze did, but with actual people being able to dance with each other and not just with the machine. And I love the fact that, of course, learning to do a tango dance would probably be one of the first things somebody's going to do. One of my favorite ideas, though, is you map in a room and then you do your favorite adventure game, or maybe some sort of action or a mystery game. Or maybe you do a horror game. You're in your home, but there are monsters coming out of the closets. There are tentacles reaching out of the drawers. It's really scary, but it's okay. You turn it off, and you're still in your home. And, the drawers are still there, and the doors and the closets. So, it might be a little bit intense, but boy, I can't wait to see what we can do to sort of play with those sorts of environments and let people actually play where they live. Shrink yourself down. What if you're only 2 inches tall in your house and you had to get from one place to another? Procedurally generated games that use a scan of the room or the whole house that you're in, and then make the game play in your own environment. And for younger kids, having them bring toys over and having those toys interact so they can fly the little drone aircraft, not just looking at a third-person view, but actually sort of seeing their house as they're flying through it. All sorts of really exciting stuff. And to go with this transmogrified reality idea, if you imagine even something like our current Tango in a head-mounted display, it can show you the visuals of the world just through the camera coming through, or it can show you graphics, and it can use the 3D display to say, oh, there's a table here, but we don't want to be in your living room. We want to be out somewhere in Tolkien's world. So we're going to have this be a tavern with wooden walls, and we're going to have a rock table in front of you, and your friends there, we'll capture them in real time too, but we'll make Timmy look like an orc, and Janice will be an elf. And you'll basically be able to kind of transmogrify people and surroundings in real time. Now, I don't guarantee that this can be done right now, but it seems clear to me that we're moving towards that, and the only thing slowing us down is, in fact, processor speed and resolution, which, as we all know, gets faster all the time, and there's lots of reason to expect we're going to be close to it. And as I mentioned before, we also have over 500,000 of these cardboards out there that are a very inexpensive way to get up to speed on some of the basic problems of VR. So we've got some stuff out there. There are many things that Oculus and Samsung and Microsoft, all these other companies are doing. But at this point, maybe you're thinking, well, this is kind of interesting, but I don't think I'm really ready for this now. And it's time for the surfing lessons. So basically, I don't know a whole lot about surfing. I'm a game designer, though, so I've learned a bunch about what I need to for this talk here. Some of the basics are that if the wave is coming and you're too late, you watch that big wave go out in front of you and you're still paddling and you've missed it. If you're too early and you go out before the wave's there, it can just be a tiny wave. You might have missed the biggest one, or maybe the big one comes behind you and overtakes you and tumbles you. And if you get it just right and everything works really well, then you can ride on to fame and fortune and success. So in order to do that, I've got a simple scene here. The idea is that what I've just described of this new idea of transmogrified reality is really a wave coming through. And it's not even one wave. Waves, in fact, in the real world tend to travel in groups. It turns out it's a myth. I had heard that there are groups of 7 waves, and the 7th one is the biggest one. It's not quite true, but they do tend to come in groups, and really big waves come in groups of really big waves. And I think that's a great analogy for what happens with our industry. When something like smartphones comes out, or this transmogrified reality, there's more than one chance, but there's not an unlimited number. And you can catch that very first wave. Sometimes people do better by catching the second or third. When consoles started to come out, turned out that the second or third wave was the biggest one we had up to that point, up to this point, in terms of number of units out there. So nothing wrong with starting early. You actually get more practice, and one of the things that's come up in several of the sites that I looked at was urging people to just get out there and start surfing the waves, because like anything else, you can't learn how to do it well unless you try and fail and try again. And that's been covered here at GDC many times. If you aren't brand new to the industry, you know what that's all about. So there's nothing wrong with trying stuff, but you do want to be able to try and time it so that you are ready for those really big waves when they come. If you're a little bit too late, you think, well, I think I've got it, but let me wait and see, or I'm going to take a little bit more time to learn more about, how to get the full 360-degree view, or this tracking is pretty complicated. Let's spend a few more months working on tuning it up. You might actually be one of the people that just misses it, and you could sort of see it slipping away. And in this analogy, funding is a lot like paddling. You have to do it. You have to get up to a certain speed to catch these waves. And if you run out of funding or you stop paddling too early, you're in big trouble. And if you start paddling and run out of energy and the big wave hasn't come, that's a danger too. And the people, though, that you could just barely see their head sticking up there, they started way too late. You don't want to be one of those guys. But there's plenty of room on the wave. These are 2 people that could make it. The one off to the side there is just getting up on their board. It's not quite clear whether the wave will break the right way for them. The other one that's closer to the person who's already standing up near the center is doing pretty well. But the fact is, you can be in the right place at the right time. You can have everything right. And there still is a factor of luck to success in surfing, I think, as well as in game development. And you do need to get everything right, get your timing right, catch that wave in order to be this person that has that chance to get lifted up and shoot through there. So, bit of a stretching an analogy there, but I think there's a lot of relevance for it. And the main thing I wanted to say is that in order to be prepared to catch that big wave and really use it well at the right time, you can't wait until everything is going well, and there are great SDKs that show you exactly how to do that, because that is definitely one of the times where there are going to be people way ahead of you that have made the first, even the second and third great transmogrified reality apps out there and are making all the money, getting all the attention, getting new funding, and you're saying, wait, but I've been preparing, I'm almost ready. So don't wait too long. Work on those components. It's one reason why I'm urging everyone to see what's here at the show. This is really the GDC of virtual reality and augmented reality. There are lots of things to see out there. Each of you comes from a different kind of background. You're going to have different strengths and weaknesses as an individual, as part of a company, and one solution may be right for you, another will be right for someone else. If you're a big company betting on something that has already a lot of backing and is going to be aimed at a very expensive system that you want to finance and basically use your might and power to do it, that's great. If you're an individual or a small company, you may want to look at the smaller, less inexpensive systems that are already out there now and get up to speed. There's really quite a range out there, and I can't answer it blanket for all of you, but I do know that this really exciting time is coming. So this is a bit of a cliche, but it's true now, I think more than many other times, that the Chinese character for crisis is made up of danger and opportunity coming together. The opportunity, hopefully I've pointed out there, and of course we're all looking to be the famous developers that have created this wonderful new thing. Personally, as a designer, one of the things I love about this is, as I alluded to with some of my examples, it's not just going out and making money on a game, it's creating entire new genres, you know, having a genre named after your game, you know, have it be adventure games because you made Adventure in the Colossal Caves, you know, or having it be a first-person shooter because you were the id guys and you were the ones who really put that on the map. There are potentially, I don't know, I mean, it may be that all of the games that we play with these, you know, virtual and augmented realities are much like versions of the current ones improved. But in my gut, I have a strong sense that there are going to be some entirely new genres out there that weren't even possible before. And it's a wonderful opportunity. The danger, of course, is guessing wrong or betting on the wrong horse, putting your energy into something that isn't a great idea, or worked fine in 3D, but when you put it into first-person VR, it didn't quite work. And the reality is there have been a lot of great talks, actually. How many people here heard Chris Pruitt's talk on mobile VR earlier today? I would recommend taking a look at The Vault for those of you who haven't seen it. He gave a great step-by-step talk through of what he did in adapting a 3D game to a 3D VR game, and it just reinforced for me that it's not only the right time, but there are some really interesting lessons that we need to learn, and he put out a lot of those lessons that were in some cases quite surprising just to share, because that's one of the great things we do at GDC. So given that, I'm going to call it for now, and it looks like I've saved enough time for a few questions. Feel free to tweet about this, to connect with me. Please do fill out the response form when it comes through. And if you want to connect to me and talk to me about this later, I like to use LinkedIn as a way to log into people, and you can link with me, and then you'll get my email address, and we can correspond that way. But please do send a little request explaining why you're doing this, because I get a lot of random LinkedIn requests too, and I don't like to say yes unless I know it's somebody who's actually a valid game developer. So, questions?
Hi. So I'm wondering what pretty much any of the companies that you mentioned that are working in this, not just Google, but also, you know, Cast AR, Oculus, all these guys, what do you think they can learn from Google Glass about getting this technology, this sort of technology, out into the world, into the public reception?
Well, it's an interesting question. Those of you who saw me last year saw that I was wearing Google Glass, and I wore it for over a year, and it was actually a really interesting experience. I'm one of those people that actually was enjoying it, and particularly at work, I found it almost invaluable. I've been bemoaning not having it here at GDC because one of the things you could do is that just with one tap and one swipe, it would bring up your entire schedule of the next several things that were popping up. And boy, you know, it seems like pulling your phone out of your pocket is not that big a deal, but believe me, not having to do that was just great, you know, and the ability to also have that kind of mobile operating system is very useful. Well, we learned a huge amount at Google. Contrary to some popular press out there, Glass isn't dead. It's been moved into another group, and they're working on some stuff, and I can't say what's next. But I will say that one of the things Google does is we publish a lot of stuff open source. There will be a lot to learn from what worked and what didn't work with Glass. One of the lessons I think is pretty obvious is that if you want a headset that's going to reach out to the public, you need to be concerned with how that looks and what people's perceptions are as well. And I've seen, you know, I think we've already made a bit of an impact when I see what other companies are doing with their head mounts. And, you know, rest assured we're thinking about that ourselves. I guess the last thing I want to say is, having seen some of the inside development going on and tested a lot of stuff that never got released to the public, head-mounted displays and interacting with the real world are actually really hard things to do well. And we had a lot of very smart people at Google working at that, making a lot of progress. And even so, it took a lot of time and wasn't perfect. So I think there's a lot to be learned still there.
Thank you.
You talked a lot about adding objects to an environment, but what about removing objects from the environment? Is that
well,
possible?
it's a good question. Is it possible to remove objects from an environment? I would say, I was going to say absolutely, and the fact is I haven't actually done it myself, so I shouldn't say absolutely. But consider the fact that I've shown that we can scan in environments, we can match the motion of the tablet that you're viewing through, or the glasses you're viewing through, to lock into that environment. One of the things that I think would be certainly the first thing I would try, let's put it that way, is that let's say you scan in your dining room with all the chairs in place but with no people in it, and you get a full 3D scan, as you saw, so that you know not only what's in the seats but what's on the walls behind them and everything. And then you bring in people and you have them sit down, and the scanning system can now capture the people. You can have video to show them, through, but you could also potentially selectively say which pixels are not like what I thought was here from the scan I have in my memory of what it happens when this chair is empty. And it seems to me that you should be able to do essentially a sort of Harry Potter invisibility cloak. If one person, think about werewolf games where you don't even know, you're sitting there and you've got the head-mounted display and it looks like there are 5 people in the room, but there are actually 7 and 2 of them are invisible. Or possibly the 7 people see different people as invisible or not invisible depending on who's there. Think about the kind of gameplay there. So yes, I think it's possible, even with a living being that has soft edges and is moving around, but I haven't tried it personally. I haven't seen it demonstrated yet. I've seen a lot of the components, again, that convinced me that we're very close to being able to doing something like that. That may be one of those things where, as with other game innovations, we may have to cheat a bit and cook the rules of how to do it. And certainly, it's going to be fun to see what people come up with along the way.
Thank you.
I have a
Oh, sorry, yes.
Okay.
It's very bright lights. It's hard for me to see who's out there.
No problem. First, congratulations for the presentation. It seems like interesting. I actually would like to thank you. I work for Microsoft. Part of my team has developed HoloLens. So thank you so much for mentioning the project.
My pleasure. I mean, it's one of the things I love about GDC is that we're all here trying to make all the games better, and if that can help you guys, more power to you.
Cool. I'm curious. You guys thought that this project Tango has some kind of localization services, but is this like based only on the camera data, or you guys are using some the Wi-Fi signal and other let's say technologies like the GPS and so on? Or?
So the question, as I understand it, is the Tango based only on on what?
Yeah, you said that you guys have localization data. You can localize inside buildings the user, right?
So
is this based on the camera data alone, or you guys are mixing?
It's based on everything we have that we can use together. So, for example, and this is all public. We've released the API to developers, and there's quite a bit on the Google site. If you just Google the term Project Tango, you can read up on a lot of this. And you can sign up to be a developer. The process, though, is that it's a combination. Hey, I'm not saying that we'll necessarily send one out right away, but anyway, the camera is and I am a game designer. I'm not a technology guy. So actually, let me leave it at the fact that I know that we use as much data as we can, including the accelerometer and gyroscope in the unit, which is actually better than the ones in standard phones, as well as what we see with that 120-degree camera to look for edges. When you saw the video, there were lots of little points of light, and those were all when the camera recognizes corners or things that it can peg and hook into those. And of course, we also have a 3D sensor much like one might say a Microsoft Kinect
Yes.
that can actually bounce the infrared off and provide extra data, so stuff that looks like it's close may actually be far away, and this can actually disambiguate some of those things as well. And then it brings all those things together into the mapping API so that it can figure out how to build that map over time and successively refine it. As you saw when it was moving through that room and scanning it, each time it walked by, if it walked past a table from one direction, it wouldn't know what was behind it, but when it came back, it knew enough to sort of fill in the blanks as you go. And because you're seeing that in real time, you can almost paint the room simply by moving the tablet around and looking for any parts that haven't really been colored in yet.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
My question is actually kind of an extension of his, which is in your project, are you able to project, not inside of a room, not using sensors as far as scanning, but outside, using GPS and the other sensors to project images where they should be in physical space outside?
Sure. Well, the way that Tango works specifically, and I'm not pushing just our technology, but that's the only one that I can answer that question to. It uses, as I said, the camera data. So if you're looking up at a blue sky, for example, there's no points for it to latch onto. But if you're outside and you're in a park and you're moving around through a park. In fact, you saw the demo there of somebody riding their bicycle with a Tango unit attached to it, and it was mapping and registering quite well there. So in an urban landscape, it works quite well. Another area where it doesn't work that well is, and I'm saying this here because I quite understand, if you've got really bright light shining at it, the cameras and the infrared both get a bit confused by that. So if you're mapping a room that has a bright light lighting it, you'll get this sort of black hole around that light, and you'll need to do some touch up at the end to fill that in, or turn the light off and be able to film it that way. So in a similar way, trying to move a tablet and look at the sun, I think it's going to blast any sensor that's out there. But what you're asking is, in theory, at least possible under the right conditions, and I don't know what those conditions are. I do know that we have at Google the Ingress, the Niantic Labs group doing Ingress, and they're very interested in this sort of thing. They've recently ported that to Google Wear so you can have it on your watches. Right. And can't speak to stuff that hasn't been announced yet, but we do talk to each other at Google about all these different projects and try and make them work together.
In terms of mapping objects into 3D space outside, are you guys using any kind of latitude, longitude, and altitude in order to project into?
Well, I guess the simple thing is to say I don't know for sure. We certainly have access to that data. I don't know how much of that is currently being used.
Hello.
And yes, over there.
Thank you very much for your talk. I think this is a good opportunity to blend with other research communities. There is at least 2 conferences, one in virtual reality, one in mixed and augmented reality, that it would be really interesting to see if we can collaborate with them. But my question goes, why another term? Why don't you think that this is augmented reality?
I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble.
Why you don't use augmented reality for this instead of the Transmogrified, which is, I think, very difficult to pronounce.
Yeah, sorry about that. To be absolutely honest, it's because if I called this talk Augmented Reality the Next Step, it would sound much less mysterious and interesting. But I really do think that it goes beyond that, because if I'll give a shout out to somebody else here. Has anyone tried the Oculus Crescent Bay? That level, and they're not the only ones doing this sort of amazing stuff, but you get to that level, it feels really different. It's not like what I've seen before with augmented reality or virtual reality, and I think calling it by those same names is kind of like, when motion pictures started to have voice in them, they called them talkies. And we don't call them talkies anymore. You just accept that they talk. and now they're movies or films, and I think that's going to happen too. It may well be that virtual reality in the future will simply be the term that encompasses augmented reality and all the kinds of magic I'm talking about. But I guess the point I wanted to make is that I really feel that we're at a point where the technology has made a truly magical feeling experience possible. If you read about Magic Leap and what they're doing, they chose that name very well. There are a lot of people that come out of that, the demos that they have, and feel that they've just seen something unlike anything they've seen before. And that's really what I'm trying to capture. I have to admit, transmogrified, it's a tough word to wrap your mouth around, but I just liked the way it sounded, and it was frankly a little bit more of a marketing thing. But the reality is, it definitely is something new and exciting and goes beyond. Just calling it augmented reality feels to me like, calling your latest, Tesla car a horseless carriage of the next generation. It doesn't really do it justice. Yes?
Hey, Noah. Can you comment on the persistence of scanned data, as in this is a device, or not just Tango, but these kinds of devices have GPS and point cloud scanners, so you could make a persistent, growing map of the world, basically. I was wondering if you have any thoughts about that.
So the area learning capability I mentioned is something that is part of the Tango API, and it's quite useful for successively refining your data there. And I guess I should put in that we're also, all through this, we've been extremely concerned about privacy and having people opt in and not sharing that data, unless you explicitly say that you want to. So, to play with a friend so that you can both be in your own homes but sort of play in each other's houses virtually, for example. But yes, that is built into the system, and it's actually part of what, and I should have given him a shout out before. The man behind Tango really started all this off was a guy named Johnny Lee. And I think a lot of you, if you don't even recognize the name, you'll remember that when the Wii had first come out, he did some interesting experiments with strapping the sensors for that on there and creating a 3D system, almost overnight, that really was the basis of a lot of the thought of what he did in this sort of thing. And he has, right from the beginning, wanted to figure out how to capture that area information and build up a good map of it.
Thank you.
Right? Whoops. Are we on there?
Testing. There we go.
Okay.
Sorry. Apologize if you covered this, but is Tango a reference design, a product, a proof of concept?
Oh, I thank you. I really didn't explain that. So right now, it is a functional development system. We've got about 1,500 of them out there in the hands of developers. If you stop by the Google booth at the expo floor tomorrow or the rest of the show, you can sign up, or you can sign up online for that. But I think at the booth they can whitelist you to get on the email list right away. There are not consumer devices yet. We haven't announced when that will happen, but we're working with partners to get consumer devices in people's hands as well. But at the moment, there's actually been several generations of developer systems that have been in the hands of developers you can find online and talk to, and in fact, there are quite a few of them here at the show, and we're showing them off in the booth tomorrow as well.
It sounds like a reference design at this point. You're going to look at other people to manufacture them?
Yes, that would probably be a fair way of putting it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure. Dan?
Thank you, Noah. Thank you for showing us where Tango is and for the tantalizing hints at where it might be going. I'm confident it's a great fit for one project I'm working on. I want to draw you out on how you interpret VR in that term. My perception of you're talking about VR, virtual reality, generally refer to things that put me visually into a space.
Yeah, I guess the simple way I look at it is thinking of virtual reality as taking over your whole vision with a virtual view that is hopefully synchronized to your movements, right, and all augmented as being letting the real world shine through to some degree.
I perceive that as like an accurate statement of what it means today, but since you mentioned, Mr. Lanier, and I'm remembering when his VR ML was a thing, my perception is virtual reality used to be, haptic feedback devices, and then before that, it was actually real-time 3D rendering on a cathode ray tube. So, my personal definition of VR is when I can't afford the peripheral. And so I think you're wise to avoid it because it's sort of aspirational. Like AI is when the problem's too hard to just put it in your game logic. But do you see that shift in VR as
No,
a slippery
it's
thing?
a really good point. I mean, and that really is the serious part of why I was using a made-up name of Transmogrified Reality. Is I feel we are moving into something new that deserves a new name, and I very much doubt that my name will be the one that will kind of propagate out there. But I'm also reminded Jesse Schell gave a talk about the game Apocalypse, and when that was covered and somebody coined the term gamification based on his talk, suddenly everybody was talking about gamification. So I do think that if a new word is needed, it will emerge. But sometimes, even to go back to my movie analogy, we don't call them color movies now, but they did at one point when they started using color, because you just expect it. Now we talk about black and white movies, when at one point that was what a movie was. And it may well be, it's already happened with VR, as you described, that term used to mean something different, but it's mutated, and it may simply mutate again. We'll find out in a few years.
Just because we both respect Jesse Schell, can I just say for the record that he publicly does not like the term gamification for the many serious health
Oh,
claims that
yeah,
he
it's a
does.
very good point. Jesse Schell, and actually, if anybody wants to hear what a lot of us think about gamification, look up gamification and Ian Bogost, and I think the first hit will explain it quite well. And all right, let's do this one last question and then wrap it up.
How does Tango compare to LiDAR in terms of
LiDAR.
resolution?
I have no idea, sorry.
Has anybody tried to strap one to the bottom of a plane or something? And if not, who do I need to talk to? Because that would be cool. I'm happy to send you the data.
Well, what I do know is that the effective range of what's on Tango now is about 3 to 4 meters. So probably not so good for planes, unless you want them to crash into things a lot.
Pass
All
on
right.
that.
Thank you very much, everybody.